He has worked there for 17 years and he was head of the department. Thereafter, he worked as a senior consultant and co-chairman in Sir Gangaram Hospital for 6 years, and for the past 13 years he's been working in Vedanta. He has been president of Indian Association of Surgical Gastroenterology, and he has got many publications up his sleeves, and he has published many chapters in the books. He has been awarded with many orations. Close to around 80 operative workshops he has conducted, and he has been awarded with many prestigious awards. So it's an absolute honor, I would say, that he would be giving this talk. The talk is 5 books that can make us a better physician. I think it's a very general topic, and it's going to benefit all the young doctors immensely, our SRs and JRs, also our faculty. Amongst the gathering we have Dr. Praveen Bhatia also, who is a master bariatric surgeon and minimally access surgeon. He is working in Sir Gangaram Hospital for many years. He has his own hospital. So we are really honored to have you, sir, here.
Thank you.
Sir, may I please call you?
Love reading books. Ever since I started operating, over years I realized that doing a surgery is important, but what is equally important is to decide when not to operate, when to operate, how to make decisions. And sadly, our system of education doesn't teach us that. Our system of education only teaches us memory, how to retain what has been told. We are never told how to think, how to analyze, and how to crystallize information. As surgeons, we need focused attention, sustained motivation, tremendous amount of commitment to match the trick to the terrain, which sadly we are not taught in our undergraduate or postgraduate studies. By destiny or by design, when I was in GB Pant Hospital, most patients with complications used to gravitate to GB Pant Hospital. I used to wonder, why do complications occur? What goes wrong? We all have the same amount of training. Why is it that some surgeons have a higher chance of complications and some surgeons are always safe? And over years I realized what was so beautifully said in this quotation in Harry Potter, that it is not our abilities that show what we are, it's our choices. Wherever you are in life, one of the most important things is to decide what do you want to do. The friends you choose, the hobbies you choose, they will determine what you are. And since we had no teachers, so I drifted to reading books. And I think since I've been reading books, I've become a much better human being and a much better surgeon. There are numerous books that I've read, and at the end of the talk we will have a question answer session. You can ask me, you can take my email address. You read a good book, send me a mail. You want to know about a good book, so ask me and we can share information. So I'm going to discuss 5 books which I thought are possibly relevant to our understanding. The first book I'm going to discuss is called Moonwalking with Einstein. This book was published in 2011. The writer of this book is a boy called Joshua Foer. Joshua Foer was a journalist who used to write scientific articles for magazines like Slate. And then in 2005, he was sent as a journalist to cover the US Memory Championship. In that championship, there are mental athletes who have fantastic memories, like they can remember a deck of cards, 50 digits, poems. So he covered that contest. And that's when he thought, are these people different or they are like us? So that question bothered him. If actually you see, we as human beings are just a bundle of memories. If you lose your memory today, you won't know whether you are in RR, where do you stay, who your family is. So we as individuals are bundles of memories. And if we improve our memory gets better, we become stronger, more powerful, more effective, more communicative. So this book is a study of the history of memory, some cutting edge research on memory, and how to improve your memory. So interestingly, Joshua Fire for 1 year followed these mental athletes. He talked to them, he discussed with them, he followed the techniques, and in 2006, he participated in the US memory contest just to try where he stands, and he won the contest. So what it goes to prove is that memory can be improved, but what harmed the memory most is the modern technology. The first harm was done by the development of the printing machine, cell phones, laptops. They definitely help us, but they have affected memory because we have shifted some of our loads to these things. I'm not saying technology is bad, but we have shifted our memory to these devices. My father could remember 20 or 30 telephone numbers. Today, apart from my own telephone number, I remember no telephone number. Whenever I have to see, I go to the phone. So I've offloaded my memory to technology. Socrates said in Greece, at that time nobody was writing. He went to the extent of saying that writing is bad because writing is going to make people dumb. Because people won't think, they won't have memory. And Greeks had a great tradition of cultivating memory. They could talk for hours, they could recite poems, they could recite many other things just by memory. And you know who kept this quotation of his life was his student Plato, who actually wrote it down. So memory has been affected, and this paper, which was published in Science 2011, is a very interesting study called the Google effect. What it means is when you consult something on the Google, you don't remember this. This is called as digital amnesia. That when you see a thing for yourself, research, search for it, it stays on your mind. But if you consult Google, don't do any hard work, it doesn't stay in your memory. So memory gets affected. So Joshua Fire has this question, that is something that you have makes you a mental athlete, your memory becomes better, or there is something you can improve. Because some people have phenomenal memory. You start thinking maybe his brain is better than mine. But research has shown that anatomically, the memory of people who have great skills to remember things and ordinary people like us, anatomically, when you do an MRI, the brain is no different. But when you are given some task to remember, say a poem or a a number of digits, the mental athletes whose memory is very good, their spatial and visual areas in the brain get lit up. So what it means is they harness extra powers in their brain to improve memory. And that's an important understanding how to improve your memory. If you take every year when the championship occurs, people come up with new techniques of improving memory. But if you take all techniques of memory improvement, you can summarize it in one word, which is called as elaborative encoding. What it means is you convert something which cannot be remembered into something which can be remembered. I'll give you an example. It's called as the Baker-Baker paradox. I tell you, there's a man, his name is Mr. Baker, and tell you there's another man who's a baker by profession, So you imagine him, there is bread, he has a funny hat, maybe he has a shop. So 3 years later, if I ask you what is the name of that man, you'll forget the baker with the big B, but you'll remember the baker with the small b, because you have associated bread, smell, things with him. I had a patient of mine who was very shy, and whenever he used to be shy, I used to feel very amused. So whenever he comes, I remember his name as Anand Sharma. Sharma is for shyness, Anand is for happiness. Another guy, he whenever used to come, he had pancreatitis, he used to wear a perfume, and he used to feel very good about himself. So I know his name was Kapoor, stands for perfume, Vijay is happiness. There's a lady who had a bile duct stricture. So when she came, her name was Nirja. So I remembered the fact that they went near her bile duct and damaged her bile duct. So if you make stories like this, your memory improves. This is my diary. Every morning, I remember 10 sentences. Look at the way I have highlighted it. So when I'm in my car, I think I'm forgetting the one which is underlined in blue. Then I think there was a sentence which is the lowest, which is second in pink. So that's how I remember things, because our mind does not remember abstract things, our mind remembers images. I do this exercise on a TRX, and when I'm doing this exercise, I know there are 3 signs. One is highlighted, one is underlined, and one has a note. So I remember that I have to keep my feet slightly apart, because I think, what was the instruction given, which is underlined. So the mind remembers the visual information. Simonides was a poet in Greece, 556 BC. In a hall like this, he was reciting poetry. Those days they didn't have a DJ or something. So as he recited the poetry, he went out, the hall collapsed, the roof fell down, and everybody in that hall died, to the extent that their bodies were badly mashed up. So the family members didn't know whose bodies were, but Simonides, when he sat, when he was reciting his poem, he remembered where everybody sat. His memory palace was working, so he could identify each person who sat in the hall, and that's where the concept of the memory palace comes. Remember when somebody asked you, where were you? You say in the first place, because conventionally we have been linking memory to our memory place. So memory place means you construct a map in your mind and you take your information there. I'll tell you how it happens. You are on the moon with Mr. Einstein, and both of you start walking. And after about 10 minutes, you drop the navigation device, and probably most of you know that Einstein had a very bad memory. He couldn't even remember his telephone. So Mr. Einstein tells you, how do we go back? We have lost our navigation system. How do we go back? So you tell Mr. Einstein, don't worry, I remember the way back. He said, how? You say, as we got down, there was a big crater to the left side. He says, Mr. Einstein says, how do you remember that? You say, as I enter my bedroom, on the left side is a big cupboard. So the cupboard is the big crater. As we walked further, there is a crater on the right side. This was a big mountain. There's a crater on the right side. He said, how do you remember that? He said, on my right side in the bedroom, there is a television. He said, what's the link between television and the crater? You say, television consumes my time, crater consumes dust, so I remember that. And as you go further, there are 3 small mountains on the left side. He said, how do you remember? He says, that's where my sofa lies, which is 3 pieces, I lie down there. So Mr. Einstein says, you are very smart. How do you do that? So you say, First, I construct a memory palace. All champions who are good at this contest construct a memory palace. Your school, your operation theater, your house, and then you chunk information that you put craters on one side, mountains on one side, and make it visual. Because our mind only takes symbols. It's difficult for mind to have abstract things. And definitely you need to practice, keep practicing hard, and Mr. Einstein says, that's okay. You will forget it after 3 years. You say, no, I make a story out of it, because memory in the mind stays hinged, tethered. Free-floating things are not remembered. When you make a story, it stays in the mind. So the lesson this book says is that memory is a skill which can be improved with practice. You need deep practice. Follow up regularly. And mind speaks in the language of pictures. The mind remembers visual images. All champions make images. They may be absurd, they may be stupid, they may be totally obscene, but whatever you make, mind remembers in pictures, and images need to be linked to stories. The second book I'm going to discuss is a book called The Extended Mind, which is a similar book to this, which was published in 2021 by Annie Murphy Paul. This is an amazing concept. We all are told traditionally that our brain is the locus of thinking. Outside the brain, there is nothing else. We don't think with anything except the brain. And that belief is actually not true. When Annie Murphy Paul, who was herself a science journalist, was interested in knowing how is it that can improve our intelligence, our thinking. And she found this article, which was published in 1998 by Andy Clark and David Chalmers, which said, the extended mind. The first line of this is beautiful. The line is, where does the mind stop and the rest of the world begin? Is the skull and the skin the limit to our mind? And that's what the concept this author challenges. Many times we are told that our mind is like a laptop in a steel case. All information is stored. That's not true. You take a laptop to the market, it will work well. But you take my brain to the market, it won't work. Then we are told sometimes that the mind is like a brain. You keep exercising, it improves. That's true to some extent, but you cannot take it up beyond a certain level. Actually, the mind is like a bird. It picks a twig from here, a shrub from there, putting things together to construct a nest. And that's the concept we need to understand beyond the brain-bound limits of our thinking. So what has harmed us is the belief that our brain is the only locus of thinking. And what this book says is the fact that if you realize the human race in last 15-20 years, the IQ of general population went very up, but now it's stabilized. Beyond this, our IQ is not increasing. So to increase our intelligence, increase our comprehension, we need to get them extra things. Like you have a hard drive for your computer, we need to have extra things. And what this book says is, we have 3 extra things in our what is called as embodied cognition, situated cognition, and distributed cognition. It sounds big but nothing difficult. Embodied cognition means using your body to think. Situated cognition means using the atmosphere to think, and distributed cognition means learning from each other. What is body wisdom? When I was in PGI, my boss, Dr. B.L. Talwar, will come into the ward and he will stand like this and he'll say, this patient is not looking well. You get a scan done. X-ray done on him. And we used to say, what a strange man he is. He's not touched the patient. How he can say that? And we used to get an X-ray done and 95% times he was right. So our body sends signals, what is called as interoception. We need to learn to listen to our body. There are signals which come from a body, what is called as non-conscious learning. So our body participates in our thinking. If you sit still, you go to sleep. If you nod when you're studying, your retention increases. Why do children get recesses in the school? They believe that after a child has played and jumped, comprehension increases. The reason for getting gymnasiums in office is this. You work for 2-3 hours, you run on the treadmill for 15-20 minutes, your performance improves, and there is a lot of research to really prove this. And an interesting concept is the role of gestures. Our parents stop us from using our hands. Now there is evidence that moving your hands makes you more communicative. It's a form of communication, and there is data which suggests that video lectures where the teacher is using hands, the comprehension and retention of students is much better. So people say these days whenever you are on a Zoom call, make sure that your hands are obvious so you can use the language of hands. It's a non-verbal way of communication. You see all great leaders, people who have charisma, the way they use their hands, and it's also important to pay attention to gestures of others, so our movements also involve thinking. Needless to say, our surroundings affect our thinking. Haven't you heard the sentence saying, he went for a thought walk? So, like the sentence, if you are working, they say, you look outside into the garden, your comprehension improves. So, the lesson of this book is that it's possible to enhance the capacity of our brain by listening to our body, using movements, improving our surroundings, and this is a skill which must be taught in schools so that we can improve the understanding and use of scientific data in a better way. The third book is a book which is very favorite of mine. It was published in 2010. It's called The Invisible Gorilla. This book was published by two cognitive scientists from Harvard, and it brought out a brilliant concept. What happened was that in this book is based on an experiment which was conducted in Harvard, where there were people wearing black t-shirts and people wearing white t-shirts. And the audience was asked to count the number of times the white people catch the basketball and number of times the people in black catch the basketball. And they were supposed at the end to give an answer, what is the number. Interestingly, what these authors did was, in between for 2 seconds, a lady wearing looking like a gorilla comes in, thumps her chest and goes. So the authors also asked the audience, did you notice anything unusual in this video? 50% people did not notice the gorilla. You might think that you will notice. This was done in many centers in the world and the results were nearly the same. So what it goes to prove is the concept of inattention blindness, what it means that we are missing a lot that is going around us. All of you sitting in this room are not seeing the same thing. Each of you is seeing something different. And the sad thing is not that we are missing. The sad thing is we have no idea that we are missing so much. It's a fact that we have an illusion of attention. We think that we are paying attention, but actually there is a lot we are missing, because what happens is when you concentrate on one thing, things in the periphery are often missed, and that's what happens in surgery. When you're doing a laparoscopic cholecystectomy, you only look at the gallbladder, you damage the bile duct. The gynecologist is doing a hysterectomy, she only looks at the uterus, the ureter gets damaged. So it's all a question of inattention blindness. Apollo Robbins is an American. He's a sleight of hand artist. You talk to him for 2 minutes and you come out, he's taken off your watch, possibly taken off your wallet also. So you won't even know. And he said something so profound that an occupied mind is missing the present. Because our mind is somewhere else, you miss what else is happening. And this is so beautifully shown in this painting by Hieronymus Bosch. This painting is called The Conjurer. If you see carefully in this painting, there's a conjurer who's showing some tricks to the people. And those of you who have observed should also notice that that man is taking out the purse of this man. So that's what happens, that attention is on one thing, something else is happening there. And that's what happens in our life, that we miss some important things happening and we get inattention blindness. I don't know if any of you know this concept of Ig Nobel prizes. As you have a Nobel Prize, there's an Ig Nobel Prize also for research which first makes people laugh and then makes them think. And this experiment got the Ig Nobel Award, and this Nobel Award is done by the Journal of Improbable Research, one of my favorite journals which I read, which is full of scientific humor. So this concept got an Ig Nobel Award for the idea of inattention blindness, something we did not understand but which exists every day. So the lesson of this book is that perception and reality are two different things. You might perceive that I am seeing everything, but actually you're missing a lot. And once you know this fact, that's good enough to learn something new in this. The fourth book I have chosen is a book called Proofiness. It's very important for us as doctors to understand this. This is written by a journalist who's also a mathematician, Charles Safe. He also wrote a book on zero. So it's a very interesting book. It tells us how mathematics is used to deceive us. What happens in life is that if I tell you any formula, a quantitative justification, you feel very happy. If I tell you that your handshake is good, you will say I'm useless. But if I put it to a different sort of a formula, you will tolerate this. Like this is a paper on saying the formula to detect the perfect butt. How do you decide somebody's bottom is perfect? Do you think it makes sense? A formula for perfect handshake. You can put any nonsense into a formula and people start believing it. So that's what happens when you misrepresent data. And for most of us, what is called as a Migo reflex, what means is you show me statistics, my eyes glaze over and I believe what has been written. But as scientists, we need to understand how to analyze information because we are very easily fooled and we tend to believe this nonsense. The term he used in this book, which is called as disestimation, taking a number too literally and understating or ignoring the uncertainties that surround it. I'll give you an example. The fact of the matter is, we believe that if we can measure something, it's true. We don't realize who has devised that measurement. A human being has devised that measurement. It may be full of flaws. So what is measured is not necessarily to be true. Do you know the story? How do we found out that our normal temperature is 98.6 degrees? Do you know what happened? In mid-1800, Dr. Karl Wunderlich from Germany claimed that he has checked the temperature of 1 million people and it came out to be 98.6 degrees. Can you believe? Can anybody check 1 million people? And to top it all, he used the underarms, not the mouth. But till today, we are following it. So that's what this estimation works, that some research done so long back, which has no credibility, has become an integral part of our medical system. So always remember when somebody tells you IQ testing, it has no relevance. If the Aborigines had invented that IQ test, me and you would be morons. We devised that IQ testing because what I needed to be measured, I put it there. That's a problem, that what we know, we want to define, and what comes out, we believe that's a fact. There's a very interesting concept of fruit packing. You know that. Cherry picking, apple polishing, comparing apples and oranges, you know. I'll tell you what cherry picking means. It's a very interesting concept called as Texas sharpshooter fallacy. Just pay attention to what happens. There's a cowboy who shoots 20 bullets on this barn door, and wherever there are maximum bullets, he draws a bull's eye. That's what we do when we see data. I was once listening to a research project of somebody on cancer gallbladder, and that surgeon was saying that cancer gallbladder is caused by the toxins in the river Ganges. The reason is because 90% of patients of gallbladder cancer in their hospital came from the Indo-Gangetic belt. So it appeals to logic that since they came from Indo-Gangetic belt, so water of Ganges must have been polluted. So I was the chairman of that session, so I asked him, you tell me how many patients in your entire hospital came from Indo-Gangetic belt? Because population is always dense around the rivers. So since majority of our patients anyway come from Indo-Gangetic belt, that's why patients of gallbladder cancer also came from Indo-Gangetic belt. You are cherry picking the data. He said, that's your problem. You have a problem for every solution. You don't want to support my research. So I said, I want to support your research, but there has to be some basis for it. There's another thing called as apple polishing. Now see, now you have a serial which shows that if you take the serial, you see in week 1, 2 and 3 significant changes, right? You take that serial in 4 weeks, your cholesterol is down. But actually if you see, what happened in the previous thing, the score was 196, 198. When you make it so small, thing will appear good, but once you make it 0, 50 and 100, it's nearly the same. So that what graphs do to us, misrepresentation of data makes us believe anything, and we are so gullible, we don't put our mind to it and we start believing these things. There is another thing called as randomness, which means we create patterns where none exist. You start seeing cause and effect relationship. This is a paper which was published in Nature. What it said was that the female athletes are running faster and faster. And in 2156, they will outrun the male athletes. But if you follow this graph further, in another 10 years, they'll be running faster than the speed of sound. Another 10 years, they'll be running faster than the speed of light. So this data is nonsense. We need to understand what is happening. We find patterns where none patterns exist. So the lesson for this book is that all roads to wisdom pass through valleys of doubt. It makes a lot of sense to be a careful skeptic. Somebody shows you data, don't jump and accept, see the data carefully and analyze. This is the last book I am going to discuss, and a book very close to my heart. It's written by a scientific journalist called Oliver Buckman, and the book is called The Antidote. You know what is happening now is that we have a cult of happiness. Everybody wants to be happy. And there is nothing more interesting than motivational speakers. It's so interesting to listen to them. This cult of staying happiness has become a part of our culture. The science of happiness tells us that happiness is a very elusive thing, you'll agree. We don't even know how to define happiness. We also know that money can't make you happy. Nobody knows what really happiness is. One thing is proven, that material progress does not bring happiness. There is a plethora of books on happiness. You can keep buying books, and it's so interesting to read them. They are pieces of fiction. What they state is so obvious, and most of them have no scientific research done. They are just impressions. They make you feel good. And you know, the booksellers, they have a funny thing of saying 18-month rule. What it says is a guy who buys a book is going to come back in 18 months and buy another book on motivation. It keeps going ahead because it doesn't work. It's just like being on a roller coaster and nowhere, because the basic ethos of these books is wrong. They want you to always look at the positive side of happiness, which does not happen. The problem of these books is they want you to get it in the mood of motivation. They don't motivate you. They ask you to act. They don't help you to act. Like Chuck Close, something very nice, that inspiration is for amateurs. For most of us, we have to get up in the morning and go to work. So it's so amusing to read these books, Because they never tell you what to do. They keep telling you, like, I had a patient who was a motivational speaker, and he had pancreatic cancer, and I've never seen a more frustrated man than him. I said, you are a motivational speaker. Why are you so frustrated? He said, no, that's for somebody else, not for me. So I said, what sort of motivation is this? There is a patient of mine, he said something very interesting. He said, he was very tense. So he said, I went to the psychiatrist. I said, I can't calm myself. I'm very distressed. He said, the psychiatrist said, try harder. So, I mean, what sort of advice is this? It's so ridiculous. So all these people are taking us for a ride. It's a very interesting concept called as ironic process theory. Just listen to it carefully. Whenever you want to suppress a thought, it will come back with renewed vigor. There's a story called as Dostoevsky used to play with his brother. He used to tell him, now you will not think of a polar bear. And that polar bear will come to you every minute. It is just like taking milk for duodenal ulcer. It temporarily suppresses it, but the rebound of acidity damages you much more. And that's what you say when people tell you, don't think about unhappiness. Never in the history of the world, somebody who's been disturbed, you tell him, calm down, he'll calm down. How can you calm down when the aorta is cut, blood is flowing out? How can you be positive? So you need to understand that this is a wrong concept that we are told, ignore negativity. We have to fail. We should always face negativity. And Aldous Huxley said something very beautiful, that trying to make everything right is a big part of what's wrong. And this is a book we must read. In 1995, on the Everest expedition, 5 mountaineers died. When you set yourself on a positive goal, you identify your ego with that goal. These mountaineers were warned that the weather conditions are bad, go on another day, but when you're motivated, you have positivity, you said no, you identify yourself with that goal and you march headlong, and these 5 people died. Being motivated is good enough, but you need to understand that plain motivation does not work. You need to have a degree of negativity into you, and there's a lot of concept of negative capability. What means is enjoy uncertainty. As a surgeon, I know my best anastomosis leak. My worst anastomosis work. I always incorporate uncertainty into my plans because there are so many factors which as a human being I don't understand. I accept insecurity. Insecurity is a part of my life. Just by telling I am secure is stupid. No, but none of us is secure, and I am comfortable with failure. I cannot win every time. I'm aware of this. I'll give my best, but that's what I can do. And it's a very important concept, what is called as memento mori. What it means is remember that we have to die. The Mexicans celebrate this. They go to the cemetery, they drink and they enjoy. And remember, for most of us who live to about 80 or 82 years, we have 4,000 weeks. Every minute you spend, the clock is ticking. It's up to you to accept it or not. But when you go back every evening, think one more day is out. So accept insecurity. This is one of my favorite paintings. It is made by the Spanish painter Antonio de Paredes, called as a gentleman's dream. The gentleman is dreaming and the angel has come, and the gentleman is realizing that money, weapons, power, everything is transient. Everything is going to go. To attach importance to these things is not justified. So, developing negative capability is nothing wrong. Learn to accept negativity. Learn to accept the premeditations of evils means expect the unexpected. It's not necessary to have closure. The problem with most of us is we want closure. We need to accept ambiguity. Many times we make the mistake, if you don't know an question to answer, you assume an answer rather than saying I don't know. When you assume an answer, that's very harmful. And in my life, I put myself to ground by thinking in my mind, what's the worst case scenario? What's the worst thing that can happen? When I was coming here, I thought if there's a traffic jam and I cannot reach the venue, what is the worst case scenario? As the worst case scenario is maybe KJ will come and talk about his favorite 5 books. That may be the worst case scenario, and he might be better than me. So once you put yourself into this worst case scenario, things get stabilized. And that's a beautiful line which I follow, that you can only decide what you walk, how much can you walk, where you end, nobody knows. And this is one of my last lessons of this talk, is when the battle of Mahabharata was over. So Lord Krishna asked Arjun that you've been a very nice disciple. I want to give you something, ask for something. So Arjun said, no, I don't want anything. Being with you is the greatest blessing. So Lord Krishna said, no, I want to give you something. So Arjun said, if you want to give me something, I want 2 things from you. I want certainty and I want security. So Lord Krishna smiled, he said, I can't give you. So Arjun said, if you can't give me, why did you ask me? So Lord Krishna said, you are right, but I make a promise with you today. If I don't give it to you, I'll give it to no man. If Arjun could not get it, me and you can never get certainty and security. Our job is to work, do our best, improve our memory, analyze data, think for the best, and give our best. What have I learned from reading? I learned that brain functions can be improved, memory can be improved, uncertainty is an integral part to our life, and reject absolute answers. I gave a similar talk with different books in another country, and I've asked a question in the audience: from which book have I benefited the most in my life? After having read so many books, which is the book from which I have benefited the most in my life? And my answer was my checkbook. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I'll be very happy to answer questions and interact with you. Thank you very much.